The Friends of Israel initiative was born in 2010, aiming to fight the delegitimization of the State of Israel. Formed by top world leaders, the Friends of Israel initiative develops a multifaceted work that involves high-level closed-door meetings with decision-makers, the publication of op-eds, analysis, and statements on the most influential worldwide media, and an educational agenda. The Friends of Israel initiative has accomplished relevant achievements and has reached a remarkable impact in the international arena.
We have actually no other choice.
The battle has only just begun.
I do believe in Israel. From the moral perspective, it's absolutely right to defend Israel.
To show support by people who are not themselves Israelis or Jews, but support for Israel, for its right to exist and its right to exist as a Jewish state.
The Friends of Israel have been extraordinarily effective in defending Israel as a part of the West, of defending its legitimacy.
We had helped Israel to gain more freedom of action and decisions in the last 5 years, thanks to the continuous advocacy in conversation with leaders all across the world.
As we have strongly claimed, in the Friends of Israel initiative, we consider that the campaign of demonization against the State of Israel must stop. All men and women of goodwill should join together to say that enough is enough.
Israel is here and Israel is going to stay.
To promote isolationism in Israel is not only to put in risk Israel, is as well put in risk the interests of the West.
As Jose Maria Aznar, the Friends of Israel Initiative chairman, has stated, all we want is a normal and reasonable conversation about Israel. Surely that is not too much to ask. The lawfare strategy against Israel has led that odd conversation to the perversion of the use of international bodies such as the International Criminal Court or the United Nations Human Rights Council.
Lawfare is a means of distorting the laws of war, international law, in order to use them against Western democracies. They're easily used against Western democracies because they're the only states, the only fighters in the world today who are actually observing the laws of armed conflict. And when international organizations use lawfare against the State of Israel, it really potentially damages all democracies because they're seeking to inflict restrictions, unrealistic restrictions on Israel, which prevent Israel from defending itself as it needs to. And of course, if that applies to Israel, it applies to every other country as well.
Is a significant threat for Israel and for all nations for that matter, because it's really an attempt to delegitimize governments. It's an attempt to begin to weaken states' actions, state controls, and put the power in the hands of unaccountable individuals.
The lawfare strategy against Israel is focusing on denying its right to defend itself and to protect its citizens.
I find it very hypocritical and I find it very disconcerting that a sovereign state is being accused of war crimes when it is defending itself against a declared terrorist organization.
I feel that Israel and the United States have the highest standards for the conduct of military hostilities when those are necessary, and I think lawfare represents an effort to intimidate political decision makers more than anything else.
To this concern, the Friends of Israel initiative is leading important projects to face this challenge.
Last year particularly was very successful. The military group that Friends of Israel sponsor, an independent research group of high officers from different countries, from Australia, the UK, Colombia, Germany, Spain, Israel, that made an analysis and an assessment of the Gaza conflict, Operation Protective Edge in particular, that has also expanded its work on a comparative study of different operations of Western armies, and that will culminate the project in an assessment of the modern conditions of warfare where our Western armies are engaged. I think it's very valuable to understand what it's all about warfare and what conditions the IDF has to face confronting irregular and non-conventional enemies like Hamas, Hezbollah, or other groups.
Within the West, the debate on Israel has become truly unfocused. The bias in the media and the misperception of Israel's position has led to the birth of anti-Israel movements that are pursuing the end of the Jewish state by other means. BDS is the paradigm of all of them.
Well, BDS is another politically correct Marxist lie. It is just an attempt, a soft-bellied cowardice attempt to foist lies upon the true state and nature of Israel. It's beholden on all of us in the West of good conscience to stand up against it, both in our business lives and in our daily lives as citizens.
BDS actually represents an existential threat to Israel in the midterm.
I think the BDS represents now the kind of threat, existential threat, that much of the rest of the world would like to have imposed on poor old Israel militarily, but never was capable of doing. Of course, it was invaded several times. Lots of Arab countries have gone to war against Israel, but they found out that ultimately they are not as good at fighting. They're not as strong. They're not as united as the Jewish people of Israel. So instead, of course, they've tried to attack Israel in different ways, and this is the latest way. And it's an extremely dangerous one, and everybody must stand up against it.
In the Friends of Israel initiative, we are aware of the real nature of the BDS movement.
The BDS tried to make impossible to live in Israel for the Jewish people, and that they live in Israel with intolerable for the Jewish people. In these circumstances, BDS is an expression of anti-Semitism, and we cannot accept this.
The Friends of Israel initiative board members are convinced that, as Jose Maria Aznar has highlighted, the best way to defend the West is to defend Israel.
The West needs to be standing with Israel, and especially in the face of an Iranian regime that has clearly said that they want to wipe Israel off the map. And as recently, the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has said that Israel will not be in existence in about 25 years. So I think the important thing is for us to own up to the commitment that we made of never again. And when we allowed the modern day state of Israel to be established, and stop denigrating and disparaging Israel for the simple thing that they are doing, which is to protect their own existence.
First and foremost, Israel must remain strong against external threats, and it needs strong support to allow it to protect itself by itself when it's necessary. Far too often we see moral relativism creep into the political discussions around the security of the State of Israel. Those of us in the Friends of Israel initiative must stand up strongly against that in our home countries and wherever it presents itself in debate around the world.
That Israel is a part of the West, and that Israel's future will have a huge influence on the future of the West.
Certainly, there are capital challenges that have to be overcome for the future of Israel and the West as civilization.
Because Israel is our bulwark in the very complicated area. I define a lot of times, that Israel is not a Middle East country, it's a Western country in the Middle East.
Strengthening our values and making clear that we need to defend ourselves, and this is a legitimate movement. And defending Israel, we are defending the first front line of this struggle, is what we are trying to convey, and the message we are passing to our leaders so they can take the right decisions about it.
The Friends of Israel initiative is truly convinced that the relation between Israel and Europe has to be stronger. However, lately the European Union has been applying a negative approach to Israel and the conflict with the Palestinians.
I wish relations between Israel and Europe were going to be good in the coming years. I wish I could say that they were going to be close in the way that they really need to be, because Israel is on the front line of the Western struggle against Islamic terrorism and fundamentalism. But I can't say that. I look at the leadership of the European Union, and I see very little there that fills me with any hope at all that this is going to be the case, and yet it must be.
What we do appreciate is that Israel and the existence, the survival and the prosperity of Israel is critical for Europe's own survival.
The Friends of Israel initiative is thus working to encourage European leaders to realize that the best ally in the Middle East is Israel, and Israel needs the help of Europeans.
First of all, for cultural reason, because we are part of the same world. We share the same values. We are both sons of the Judeo-Christian civilization. Judeo-Christian civilization achieved the most important development and goals in the history of the world. We share the same threats, especially in terms of security. We share the same interests, especially in economic policies and economic interests. And we must establish a totally interconnection.
One of the most important challenges that Israel is facing today is a nuclear Iran. To this concern, the Friends of Israel initiative has developed an intense agenda in order to prevent a bad deal with Iran. Finally, world powers led by the United States signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is a bad agreement that paves the way to the nuclear bomb and boosts Iran's malign activities.
I think the agreement that Obama has made with Iran is thoroughly bad. I think it's going to have terrible consequences in some parts of the Middle East. How and when the Iranians will pursue their objectives, which I believe are unchanged, which are to become hegemonic in the region and to become a nuclear power. When they make the moves in that direction, I don't know. But this agreement.
The deal is delaying the problems we have with the Iranians for 10 or 15 years. And my problem with all this is that for the Iranians, 10 or 15 years is just a moment, a minuscule moment in their centuries-old history.
Iran's a major power, and they support Hezbollah, they support Hamas, they're against the Israeli-Palestinian peace agreement, and so that's the biggest threat. There's also threats of terrorism.
Nonetheless, we will remain vigilant and will monitor the implementation of the agreement.
I don't think we can trust the Iranian regime, at least at this time. There's not a history in the record, if you will, that allows us to trust them. Going forward, I think we need to be vigilant. We need to monitor very closely and be prepared to take action.
All we can do now, given that the deal is going through, is to be absolutely vigilant in monitoring what Iran is doing.
We cannot trust Iran. We cannot trust a regime that is a theocratic in nature and is a militant Islamic regime, a regime that has been at war with the United States of America since 1979, a regime in Iran that currently holds 4 Americans hostages. Back then they held 52. The blood of Americans are on the hands of the Iranians since 1983 with the Beirut barracks bombing, and even today, some 20% of the deaths in Iraq, were the direct responsibility of explosive force penetrators, very lethal IEDs that were provided by Iran to terrorists.
Despite the diplomatic honeymoon with Iran, the Ayatollah's regime is still a huge danger for international security, not only for Israel.
After the nuclear deal has been signed and implemented, we need to keep a close eye on the behavior and real nature of Iran. Iran is not a normal country, and we need to convey the message that it is not possible to embrace Iran as a normal country until Iran regime changes profoundly.
Amid the current mess in the Middle East, the expansion of the barbaric jihadism of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, or Boko Haram is a direct threat to the future of the West.
While the Islamic State controls territory, that territory can be used by extremist groups in order to launch and plan terrorist strikes against the West, as we saw from Afghanistan.
It's a significant threat to the West, and I think one of the things that we need to be worried about is the reach to our civilian populations here in the United States or elsewhere. So I think this is something that we need to be taking very, very seriously and start taking actions now.
Given the current scenario, it is necessary to rethink a new strategy in order to defend the Western democracies against such threats.
We've got to stand strongly against the values that it represents. This is a war against modernity. It's a war against pluralism. The first thing we can do is stand with our friends and allies in the region. And obviously, the only liberal democracy is Israel. And we should be tremendously concerned. That's why it's tremendously important that freedom-loving people everywhere work together to tackle this menace and threat to world peace and order.
We must rethink the strategy in Europe. We must rethink this strategy because confronting ISIS, confronting Islamic terrorism is not only a decision to be more active militarily, with most decisive actions militarily, is as well to have a very serious political decisions and will to be active in defense of human rights, in defense of democracy, in defense of rule of law, in defense of people that fighting for freedom.
We need to rethink our security conditions, we need to rethink the laws, we need to rethink the counter-terrorism measures to be taken. But it's a battle, whether we like it or not, we need to fight, because the opposite is just the surrender of our Western values and our way of life. So there is no escape to this dilemma. We need to confront the jihadists here and abroad if we want to win.
Due to the instability in the Middle East, we sadly might witness the end of Christianity, something terrible that we are not going to ignore.
As a Christian and a Catholic, I'm very much concerned about the persecution of Christians that is taking place in many of the countries of the Middle East. We have seen once again, after centuries, the religious belief to be held as a problem, as an impossibility of living together. And I think the Muslim push in this sense has been catastrophic. Sometimes I feel the media don't give enough consideration to this slaughtering, killing of people because they are in a church or because they believe in God in a certain way. I must raise my voice, once again, not only as a Christian and a Catholic, but as a human being of this backwards going of history.
Christian people in the Middle East are suffering terribly at present. They're being horribly massacred by the Islamic State and by other radicals who are trying desperately to wipe them out and wipe anyone out who doesn't agree with their theological position.
I think the future of the Christian people in the Middle East at the moment is absolutely disastrous.
As Westerners, we have a moral commitment to the Jewish people. Hence, we are very concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism across the West, especially in Europe. We will confront the fact that the trend has to be reversed, not only due to moral reasons, but also because Jews have seen the light of Judeo-Christian civilization. So if we want to preserve the West as we know it, combating anti-Semitism is also in our best interests.
Being anti-Zionist is an elegant or disguised way of being anti-Semitic.
We need to understand that the Jewish people are around the world and have a significant contribution to humanity and to the world.
And I am very clear that the voice of Friends of Israel will be always in defense of the Jewish people or in defense of Israel. We cannot accept anyway any expression of anti-Semitism.
Throughout its existence, the Friends of Israel has focused its actions on paramount challenges that Israel and the West are facing.
I think it's so important in the next 5 years, the Friends of Israel initiative continues to grow and expand with these former heads of state, non-Jewish members, but also we need to get more military members.
I think it was a very good thing to create the Friends of Israel initiative. I think it has developed in a very good and positive way, and I'm very glad to have been associated with it. And I think we have to continue and expand where we can.
The Friends of Israel initiative can play a very important and powerful role in supporting the Jewish state lobbying and taking the message to high-level leaders in government and parliaments around the world, providing key analysis and backgrounds, supporting the Middle East's only liberal democracy as it seeks to address the great challenges of our generation. It can have a tremendously important role and lead to real change in decision makers at the top.
In the years to come, the Friends of Israel is aware of the pending tasks to fulfill.
We need to keep defending Israel because Israel is at the forefront of this civilizational struggle. It's the only island of stability from Morocco to Afghanistan or Philippines. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. It's the most advanced technological country probably in the world. And losing Israel will be suicidal for the West. So that's our message. Israel is not only our cradle of our civilization, it's not the roots of our history, it's the future of our technology, it's the future of welfare, and we need to preserve Israel as it is, a vibrant, open, democratic country.
In defense of the idea, basic for us, that Israel is an essential part of the Western world. Or in other words, there is no West without Israel.